Namaskar. In today's class, we will discuss about positive psychology, its importance, relevance of the field and then main objectives of positive psychology. And we will also explore what is Indian psychology versus psychology in India. Connections between Indian psychology and positive psychology will also discuss in today's class. There are various definitions of positive psychology. As Seligman has mentioned that psychology is not just the study of weakness and damage, it is also the study of strength and virtue. Treatment is not just fixing what is broken, it is nurturing what is best within us also. There are various definitions of psychology where psychologists have focused on certain positive aspects to define positive psychology. Let us take some of these definitions. Positive psychology is the scientific study of optimal human functioning. Positive psychology is the scientific study of human happiness is another definition. Positive psychology has three central concerns: positive emotions, positive individual traits and positive institutions. The field of positive psychology at the subjective level is about valued subjective experiences which are in the past, for the future and in the present also. So, it explores various aspects when we take into account the past, well-being, contentment, satisfaction, etc. For the future, hope and optimism, and present, flow and happiness is being explored in positive psychology. This field is found on the belief that people want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives, to cultivate what is best within themselves and to enhance their experiences of daily activities. Traditional psychologists ask the question, what is wrong with you and how can we fix it? But positive psychology asks, what is right with you and how can we promote it? As Mark Holder mentioned in his book, healing what is weak and nurturing what is strong as the 21st century unfolds. However, we positive psychologists are beginning to ask another question, what is right about people? So, positive psychologists have discovered that there is a set of human strengths that most likely buffers against mental illness: courage, optimism, interpersonal skills, work ethics, hope, honesty, perseverance, etc. And therefore, we need to foster these virtue in young people. I think it is clear to us that positive psychology mainly focus on positive aspects. It focused on positive personality traits, on character strengths, on virtues and positive direction of a human behavior it has. So, where are your strengths? How you can improve those strengths is subject matter of positive psychology. Before talking more about positive psychology, let us know a little bit on importance of positive psychology, why it is established as an independent field in the field of psychology. There are various studies, meta-analytic studies which are showing importance of positive psychology. When it was initiated, then various meta-analytic researches showed that psychologists are focusing more on negative aspects of human behavior as compared to positive aspects of human behavior. So, this data showing that we have multifolded research on negative aspects as compared to positive aspects. For example, this psychological abstract study between 1967 showing us that positive aspects have been addressed comparatively quite low as compared to negative aspects. For example, this analysis showing that a number of studies happened on negative aspects of human behavior as well as positive aspects of human behavior. Say, for anger, there were 5,584 studies. For anxiety, 41,416 studies, and on depression, studies were 54,040. On the other hand, on positive aspects like joy, studies were only 415. On happiness, studies were 1,710 only, and life satisfaction 2,582. Another study by Myers, he did a meta-analysis and reported that psychological abstracts have included approximately 13 times more studies on negative emotions, and data showed that studies on anger were 10,735, on anxiety 70,845, and on depression it was 86,767. On the other hand, on positive aspects like on joy, studies were 1,161. On life satisfaction 7,949, and on happiness 3,938 only. So, it means this is about 13:1 ratio between negative to positive aspects of human behavior. However, it has been observed that even need to address negative aspects of human personality. Studying negative aspects of human behavior, as Caddison has mentioned that we should focus on negative aspects also, and he gave example of depression. He said depression is 10 times higher than it was in 1960, and mean age for depression is 14.5 years now and was 29.5 years in 1960. So, this study conducted in 2005, I think depression is gradually increasing only. He also mentioned that 80% of Harvard students were depressed at least once last year. 45% of college students are depressed nationwide, and 94% are overwhelmed. To some extent, this study showed importance of studying negative behaviors like depression. However, we have well established fields for addressing disorders and negative effects, such as we have abnormal psychology, we have counseling psychology, clinical psychology, psychiatry, and in these fields outrightly we can focus on negative aspects of human behavior as well as on different psychological disorders. Why we want to have positive psychology as an independent discipline? Seligman, during his American Psychological Association presidentship, observed that before World War II, psychology had three distinct missions. Number 1, to cure mental illness. Number 2, to make everyone's lives happier and more productive and fulfilling. And the third was to identify and nurture high talent and genius. Shortly after the World War II, the primary focus of psychology shifted to the first priority, that was treating abnormal behavior and mental illnesses. And that is why we started to focus more on treatment, more on negative aspects of human behavior rather on positive behaviors. I think for having difference between abnormal mode and normal mode or positive mode, we should study some models to describe how we address abnormal behavior, how we can address healthy behavior. So, this is an example. I think this disease versus health model tell us what we focus when we are talking about negative aspects of human personality, what we address when we are talking about positive aspects of human nature. So, let us compare this disease model to understand more how abnormal setting taking place in this field and how positive settings could take place in this field. So, first of all, what do we study in disease model? Neurosis, anger, anxiety, depression, psychosis, etc. On the other hand, in health model, we focus more on well-being, on satisfaction, on joy, on excitement and on happiness, etc. Disease model focus more on weaknesses and we try to avoid pain, and our focus is on overcoming deficiency, and we are running from unhappiness and we want to get a little bit happiness or at least neutral level on happiness. On the other hand, in health model we focus on strengths and our objective is to seek pleasure. Building competency is subject matter this side, and we are pursuing happiness during this model or this treatment, we can say, or this process. Tensionless as ideal for disease model, because we had tension which is negative and which is disturbing us. That is why if we do not have tension, that is an ideal for us. On the other hand, this side we are creating tension. Don't be confused please, because this tension is actually positive tension, and this tension is to grow further, to get certain meaning in life, to have some purpose in life. So, this tension is positive tension, and for creativity or for having something good in our life, we create certain tensions. Having here neurosis, anger, anxiety, depression free is our neutral state, and that is our ceiling. On the other hand, no ceiling in health model. Every day we are growing, we are getting betterment in our life and progressing in our life in that direction. So, I think that is clear to you now. Disease model focus more on stress, anxiety, illness problems, and we want to have stress free, anxiety free, illness free, and that is our 0 point or the neutral point we can say. On the other hand, this model also talking about health model on strengths, on meaning, engagement, and in this direction every day we are growing and there is no ceiling. So, I hope it is clear to you what is disease model and what is health model, and this health model is promoted in positive psychology. We have various programs. In some we focus on preventions, and sometime we have some enhancement kind of plans. So, for preventing the bad and promoting the good, we may have 4 type of programs: primary prevention, secondary prevention, primary enhancement and secondary enhancement. Primary prevention stop the bad before it happens to psychological and physical health. On the other hand, in secondary prevention, we fix the problem and we use various psychotherapies and counselings for this. Primary enhancement make life good, psychological and physical health we have. On the other hand, for secondary enhancement, make life the best possible, and that is our objective. So, for prevention, for enhancement, we have various programs. Some of them are from in neutral mode and others to grow further. Main objectives of positive psychology is another point here, and I think we should know what are main objectives of positive psychology, because it will help us to understand next chapters and why we have selected some of these chapters. First objective of positive psychology is identifying, amplifying and concentrating on the character strengths. So, broadly we want to identify all those character strengths, virtues, positive personality traits which are helping us to have better life or helping us to have well-being, happiness, satisfaction in our life. After knowing all those character strengths, second point is need to measure, need to assess individuals on the basis of these character strengths. For example, I think simplest example here could be psychological testing. We have various psychological tests, and by using these tests we can say who has higher level of, who has lower level of on these constructs. For example, happiness level, for example, forgiveness level, for example, greed level, for example, character strengths level. So, on the basis of this we could have individual differences and can say how many of us are flourishing, how many of us are languishing, how many of us have moderate level of mental health. So, through assessment we are able to say or to give response on what is the level of positive personality traits of different people. Third objective is to develop and test interventions to build these strengths. And in this case, we want to build up through some intervention programs better level of character strengths, happiness, mental health, etc. So, that is mainly area of applied positive psychology. But even in this course, in some situations, I will discuss about some of these intervention programs which are helping us to have higher level of well-being. Peterson and Seligman argued that we do not have any manual for character strengths, for virtue and character strengths, and I will discuss this point once again in next slides, but just to connect about it. They are saying that we have various editions or various revisions of Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, and latest one is the 5th edition. On the other hand, we do not have any manual which is talking about character strengths, which is talking about virtues, which is having list of positive personality traits, and they have proposed first study called UNDSM-1. UNDSM-1, which has list of character strengths instead of DSM, which is talking about Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. Because we worked more on negative aspects of human personality, more work on abnormal behavior, that is why every year we have revisions, we have more understanding on mental disorders. So, this study is saying that the number of pages has increased from 86 in 1952, that was, and now in 1994 it was almost 900. As this study is showing, the number of pages has increased from 86 in 1952 to almost 900 in 1994, and the number of mental disorders has increased from 106 to 297. So, because we focused more on negative aspects of human personality, on mental disorders. So, every year we are getting higher level of understanding on mental disorders as well as increasing number of pages in our manual. On the other hand, we are not talking about character strengths, virtues, positive personality traits. That is why that this information is scattered here and there. Empirical validated therapies and interventions are also promoted in this field. Positive psychologists are strengthening the strengths rather than repairing their patients' weaknesses. So, that is why there are various intervention programs, and in these intervention programs we have been highlighting on positive personality traits. We need psychologists who work with families, schools, religious communities and corporate to emphasize their primary role of fostering strengths. So, we can identify some groups and then how we can foster character strengths and virtues in these groups, and for this we have number of intervention programs well established in positive psychology now. Applied psychology or applied approach to uncovering people's strengths and promoting their positive functioning is required, and it is mainly focused in applied positive psychology. So, main area here when we are talking about intervention programs, I think our main agenda is to improve our normal level to higher level, and through certain intervention programs we can easily improve mental health of an individual, and moderate mental health as well as flourishing level can be changed, can be improved through certain intervention programs. Even in history as well as in recent research, it has been observed that there are various intervention programs which are really helping to have better well-being. If we just go with the history, as I discussed in previous class also, for DC pioneer work showed it was possible to significantly boost happiness levels among non-clinical population using a package of interventions. So, that is even well established, having positive results in normal population and increasing level of happiness in non-clinical population, as these studies happen in 1977 and 1983. However, even in recent research, Rusk and Waters in 2013, they mentioned that it has been rapid growth in interest and research in positive mental health in past 15 years and considerable positive outcomes associated with happiness. They also mentioned that positive psychology's academic output is growing proportionately faster than psychological research as a whole, and they said positive psychology related documents account for between 10% and 36% of research in the field of counseling, education, organization sector, behavioral medicines and health psychology. So, there are various areas in which they have adapted positive psychological approaches and now they are flourishing and doing number of research studies. So, one another study showing that progress in positive psychology. So, if you could see study empirical studies, non-empirical studies and total studies. So, every year all kind of studies are gradually increasing and last data say in 2011, 12 and 13 these studies are say gradually increasing. So, it shows progress in positive psychology. Basic themes of positive psychology could be the good life, contribute to building positive connections to others, positive individual traits and life regulation qualities. So, these four basic themes could be explored in positive psychology. Let us understand them one by one. The good life. Positive psychology is concerned essentially with the elements of and predictors of the good life. So, we are programmed to grow and we want to have good life and that is why we want to have all kind of activities which promote our good life and that is subject matter of positive psychology. Second theme could be aspects of our behavior that contribute to building positive connections to others and it includes the ability to love, the presence of altruistic concerns, the ability to forgive and the presence of spiritual connections to help creative sense of deeper meaning and purpose in life. So, broadly when we connect with others, then how do we have positivity in relationship? Third is positive individual traits and these positive individual traits contribute to our personality positively. Sense of integrity, the ability to play and be creative and the presence of virtues like courage and humanity is important in this field. Then final one is life regulation qualities, allow us to regulate our day to day behavior so that we can accomplish our goals while helping to enrich the people and institutions we encounter along the way. These qualities include a sense of individuality or autonomy, a high degree of healthy self control and the presence of wisdom as a guide to behave. So, it means basic themes of positive psychology and we can have longer list. So, basically the good life, activities which regulate our life as well as individual traits or the traits when we are dealing with others broadly can be observed inter and intrapersonal character strengths. In detail, this topic will be discussed in character strengths chapter. Character strengths and virtues, I think initial work we must know. However, as I mentioned that is our separate topic and we will discover various positive personality traits or character strengths, virtues and various scholars work in this line. But at least initial work we should know. That is first book written by Character Strengths and Virtues, written by Peterson and Seligman and they argue to have DSM-1 based on this book. And in this book they have identified and classified the positive psychological traits of human beings and broadly they are talking about 24 character strengths under 6 virtues. And there are some definitions which outrightly focused on positive personality traits or on character strengths on virtues. So, this definition is in that direction only. This definition says positive psychology is the scientific study of the strengths and virtues that enable individuals and communities to thrive. So, what are those character strengths? This is I think well known model in psychology. So, as per this model there are 6 virtues, again I am repeating, I will do these all virtues as well as character strengths in detail in one of the chapters. So, but here I think list we should know. So, wisdom and knowledge is first virtue and this virtue, under this virtue the character strengths are creativity, curiosity, open mindedness, love of learning and perspective. Another virtue is justice. It covers citizenship, fairness, leadership. Then temperance has forgiveness and mercy, humanity or modesty, prudence, self-regulation. Transcendence has other characteristics like appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, spirituality. Humanity covers love, kindness and social intelligence, and courage, bravery, persistence, integrity and vitality. As I mentioned, we will discuss all these traits in detail in the next classes. So, next point here is what positive psychology is. So, if you just take into account certain areas, and that are your chapters also, your next lessons also, like flow, it is happiness in terms of eudaimonia as well as psychological well-being or happiness and well-being and hedonic approaches, and motivation and goal theories will be covered in some of the chapters. In terms of positive emotions, it is talk about humor, positive emotions, emotional intelligence, and it covers all these virtues which we have already discussed in the previous slide. It is covered positive coping, positive aging, coping with choice, resilience, etc. And applied positive psychology also very important in this field. In applied positive psychology, we focus on coaching, on positive therapy, positive education, positive business, positive aging, and psychology of time is also covered in this area. So, that is web, which is having different chapters or different ideas which can be explored in positive psychology, and some of them will be discussed in the next chapters. In this course, we have borrowed various Indian constructs help to explain human behavior. So, that is why we should know our roots, and here topic is what is difference between Indian psychology and psychology in India, what these two are. So, topic is Indian psychology versus psychology in India. First of all, let us know what is Indian psychology, and that is totally different from mainstream of psychology, which is broadly from West, from European countries, and we are doing here in India also. So, Indian psychology is unique field of psychology through which we can understand human behavior, but it is not connected with our mainstream of psychology. So, that is why we should know what is difference between Indian psychology and psychology which is being studied here in India. So, first let us know what Indian psychology is. Indian psychology is an approach to psychology based on the Indian ethos, the characteristic spirit of the Indian civilization. One could also say that it is a psychology rooted in the consciousness based Indian worldview, yoga and a life affirming spirituality. It is not a psychology specifically or exclusively suitable for people living in the India subcontinent or of Indian origin, but the Indian tradition can make valuable contribution to the psychological understanding of all human beings, irrespective of their cultural background. It means the models, the constructs, the theories, understanding of human behavior which we have can be applied in any other cultures. We can test human personality in terms of Sat, Rajas, Tamas here in India, but it can be tested in European or in Western countries or in on USA data. One of the study we will discuss later on how we have done cross cultural research. So, here author is saying that these models or this explanation of human behavior, it is not only for Indian people. These explanation can be used in any given culture. We have positivity by doing yoga and meditation. So, Indian psychology, a little bit more information about it. Indian psychology has its roots in the diverse traditions of knowledge deliberated upon in various texts called Shastras, as well as the practices and meaning embodied in various forms shared by the people or lok in the zone of Indian civilization. Another definition says that it primarily deals with the inner state of a person, taking consciousness as the primary subject matter of study. So, I think that point should be very clear to us. It focuses mainly on consciousness. Somewhere I will discuss about even methodology, because mainly it is focused first person and second person approach rather on third person approach. So, Indian psychology is a hallmark of spirituality and inner directedness. Some scholars have taken even definition and how these definitions are connected with yoga. Since the time of the Upanishad, the Jeev means living organism, has been characterized as a Gyan, Bhog and Karta, as one who knows, feels pleasure and pain, and action or acts. So, following the Indian concepts of the Jiva as Gyata, Bhokta, Karta, converted in 3 yogas, and these yogas help us to have positive direction of behavior in terms of Gyan Yoga, in terms of Bhakti Yoga, in terms of Karma Yoga. So, broadly we are saying that the activities which we are doing in terms of knowing, in terms of feeling pleasure and pain, or in action, or if I just say exact literature from our religious literature, then Gyata, Bhokta and Karta we are, and that is subject matter of psychology. And then in positive direction, if we use yogic path for doing such activities, and these yogic paths could be certain yogas like Gyan Yoga, Bhakti Yoga or Karma Yoga, or knowledge, devotion, action in yogas. After knowing Indian psychology, let us know psychology in India. For that, we should revisit historical background of psychology. If we just take certain examples, for example, Professor Anand Sen Gupta, who was head and initiated department in Kolkata University in 1916. He was William Wundt's student's Hugo student, and they worked on depth perception, psychophysics and attention. Next successor, G.S. Bose, he was medical doctor and a psychiatrist, and his main work was on repression. He was Sigmund Freud's student, and he initiated Indian Psychoanalytic Society, which was affiliated by International Psychoanalytic Society. In 1938, they had Indian Science Congress, and these scholars invited scholars from abroad, Carl Jung, Myers, Spearmans, and they knew about psychology which was being used in different countries. Similarly, Professor M.V. Gopal Swami, Department of Psychology at Mysore, he initiated, and he worked with Spearman on mental testing. Indian adaptation of Western intelligence test he initiated and applied psychological principle in the field of education. So, I think it is very clear here the scholars or our forefathers of psychology who initiated different departments in Indian universities, they were well trained and worked with European and Western scholars, and that is why they initiated psychology which was happening all over the world in different countries, and somehow we skipped Indian concepts when we started to study in Indian setting. What is relevance of Indian psychology? If its psychology in India is universal one, then what is the use of and what is the relevance of Indian psychology? Why we are talking about Indian psychology? Why we are giving more importance to Indian psychology? In recent years, in 1965, 67, 80, 81, 86, 97, 98 studies by Dr. Sinha and other scholars realize that we are skipping something. We are not able to cover each and everything when we are studying human behavior in Indian setting. Psychology in India has remained disassociated from its own vast storehouse of knowledge inherent in the Indian philosophical text. Dr. Sinha gave a call for integration of modern psychology with Indian thought. A large number of publications have become out during this period critically reviewing the state of psychology in India, and he wrote various research papers writings in 67, 81, 86, 97 and 98. And another scholar K.G. Agarwal, he said actually we are doing adoptology. We are not addressing our core roots of socio-cultural issues when we are studying human behavior in Indian setting. As Mishra in 1990 also pointed out that rural and urban India constitute largely independent subsystems that require separate tool for data collection and separate parameters for analysis and understanding. One can't understand the rural by applying the principles and parameters derived from the urban samples. So, it means these scholars gave importance of socio-cultural factors, understanding of human behavior in specific context. So, they have highlighted indigenous psychologies. Indigenous or local psychology is a psychological current heading to understand human in their native cultural context. So, as per criticism of these scholars on studying human behavior in Indian setting, we should give importance of socio-cultural factors, cultural factors, as well as we should try to understand human behavior with Indian philosophical and Indian religious spiritual literature messages. Exactly about positive psychology and how Indian psychology is connected with it. If we just take two topmost work like yoga and meditation and how these two are interacting with positive psychology, then broadly we can say positive psychology and Indian psychology are connected, and to some extent we should have middle path when we are doing psychology in India. So, first yoga and meditation which have been taken from Indian as well as from Eastern cultures, and now these two practices are counted as intervention programs. A positive intervention programs as yoga and meditation, and it cultivate positivity in our behavior and thoughts, and sometime we are using even in intervention programs tool for well-being. Yogic ideas and meditation are contemporary to Western positive psychology, and they are counted for the attainment of deep and lasting happiness. So, that is why not only Western perspective, but we have to have some Indian perspectives to understand positive aspects of human personality. It has been highlighted by other scholars also. Positive psychology and Indian psychology are like birds of a feather flock together, as Kiran Kumar in 2006 mentioned, because focus of both is on achieving well-being. However, this achieving well-being is quite different in Indian perspective and quite different in Western perspective. Even way of studying this well-being is totally different with the Indian perspective and Western perspective. There are several books come on the psychological relevance on Bhagavad Gita. Maslow's theory of meta motivation is very similar to the concept of Nishkam Karma outlined in the Gita. So, similarly there are some concepts which have been borrowed from Indian religious literature or Indian religious spiritual literature, and then even Western scholars try to define human behavior by using such kind of terms. So, that's why we should know a little bit more about Indian constructs which could help us to understand positive aspects of human personality. As Cohen in 2008 also gave respect to Eastern historical background, and he said deep respect for Eastern historical and cultural context of yoga, and use the practice to support us in more fully embracing our own lives here. When we say Indian psychology is based on philosophical and religious spiritual literature, then we are connecting actually human behavior with this dimension. However, in recent literature, even Western scholars have highlighted religious and spiritual domain. For example, if we just talk about these three books, first book is by Professor Bauk. He is talking about spirituality and Indian psychology, and in this book he has borrowed various modules to define human behavior from Bhagavad Gita. On the other hand, another example is Religion and Spirituality Across Cultures book. In this book, authors have highlighted various religions like Islam, like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc., and they have identified certain practices which help us to have positivity in our life. Similarly, another book which has published in 2018 only, Why Religion and Spirituality Matter for Public Health. So, such kind of literature or books showed importance of religion and spirituality domain to have better well-being. And that is why now not only Indian psychology, but Western scholars also give importance to religion and spirituality in their studies. Review of ancient Indian literature. So, philosophical, religious, spiritual literature will be addressed in some of the topics on positive psychology. Positive factors from Indian psychology are revealed and discussed in this course, and that is why very important to address religion and spiritual domain to understand well-being and other positive personality traits. We also wrote one chapter and which is culture specific, and it has been published in Positive Nations and Communities. This Positive Nations and Communities book, there are various practices which have been borrowed from different nations as well as from different communities, and then they are saying that how these practices helping us to have better well-being. So, in this book we wrote a chapter, Satsang, culture specific effective practice for well-being. So, that is why in this course you will find some studies based on universal ideas and some studies which are really based on particular socio-cultural settings, and that is very important for us to have in this course to understand uniqueness of certain things. So, in the background of Indian philosophical research and ancient religious spiritual literature, today's psychology and positive psychology in India should be positive psychology and Indian psychology's interaction, and then finally we are saying positive psychology in India. So, it means if we find some factors are really important to add on from Indian psychology to understand positive aspects of human behavior, then we should not hesitate to borrow, and our at least positive psychology in India should be contributed by both mainstream of psychology, that is positive psychology, and our local or our Indian psychology and its explanations, and we can have some of these theories, models to understand human behavior further in positive direction. I think before completing this chapter, we should know two more concepts, because these concepts will be taken into account again and again in next chapters. So, we should know about them, which are focused on the culture. First one is individualistic versus collectivistic culture. On the basis of this parameter, we can divide cultures into individualistic versus collectivistic culture. Individualism or individualistic culture is psychology of me or I. On the other hand, collectivism, study of we. What are difference between individualistic and collectivistic cultures? People from individualistic cultures are more like to have an independent view of themselves. They see themselves as separate from others, or individuality in fact they have. Define themselves based on their personal traits and see their characteristics as relatively stable and unchanging. On the other hand, people from collectivistic cultures are more likely to have an interdependent view of themselves. They see themselves as connected to others, define themselves in terms of relationships with others, and see their characteristics as more likely to change across different contexts. So, in some studies you will find when we are talking about happiness, when we are talking about mindfulness, resilience, etc., sometime I will give example of individualistic versus collectivistic culture. So, you should know what does it mean. Indian culture is counting, almost all Asian cultures broadly are counted as collectivistic culture, and sometime culture will be highlighted in the studies of flow, happiness, and in next chapters. So, then another point is culture and time orientation. It is also observed that sometime we focus differently in different cultures when we take into account time orientation. One way of looking at cultural attitudes to time is in terms of time orientation, a cultural or national preference towards past, present or future thinking. For example, America is often considered to be future oriented country. On the other hand, France present oriented and past oriented Britain and India. Some scholars realize that often but not always a past orientation arises in cultures with a long history like India or China, and a future orientation in young countries like USA. And that is why time orientation would be important for us for certain studies. So, I think various aspects you have learned in this course, but we must know there are different fields in positive psychology in modern time. Say we have positive education. In school setting, various programs are going on. Even in India, happiness curriculum in Delhi schools we have. Some scholars are focusing outrightly on positive health, on positive assessment. Positive assessment means when we have testing on based on positive personality traits. Positive psychotherapies are going on. Positive organizations means they change setting to have positive personality traits or having higher level of well-being, and lot of literature available even in terms of nations, in terms of communities in which we are highlighting practices are provided over there in positive direction. So, in all these cases we want to have some settings change or socio-cultural changes in the environment to have higher level of well-being, higher level of happiness, etc. So, I think in this class all concepts are clear to you. You must know positive psychology's definitions and should be able to discuss at least one overall view of positive psychology. Then you should know about the importance which we discussed here with the help of various meta-analytic researches, what is relevance of this field and main objectives of positive psychology, what are our different areas which we want to cover in positive psychology. Then difference between Indian psychology and psychology in India you should know, and to some extent you should be able to connect Indian psychology and positive psychology. However, this concept will be discussed further in next chapters. There are some books, so you could purchase or you could read these books if you want to know more about positive psychology. Thank you very much.